Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to the Future City Conference and our session of this afternoon on smart and sustainable mobility in cities. So I hope you had a good lunch and you're ready to move and talk about mobility. So mobility, it's such a central element, of our societies. When you talk to people, how they go to work, how they do their shopping, how they go and see family and friends, how they move around, basically, is always one of the first, big points in their life, first needs that come to their mind. So a conference dedicated to the future city, the core of the green and digital transitions in Europe, could not have a session dedicated to smart and sustainable mobility. So, and more particularly to sustainable and smart mobility and how to achieve a more sustainable, how many times we talk about sustainability, a more sustainable and efficient transport ecosystem in cities. So, looking at how to transform those transport systems in the European cities towards systems that generate lower carbon emissions, reduce road congestions, improve safety, achieve efficiencies, and become more adapted to citizens' needs. These are exactly the issues we're going to talk about. And of course, data, digital technologies, all that have a central role to play in many ways, like making, driving behaviors more efficient, helping real-time traffic management, informing city planning and spatial use in urban areas. This is really important for local authorities, and so on. So really looking at all these elements. And this discussion, I would say, is even more, important and key in the light of what COVID and the pandemic has shown us in this period, because, this crisis has been fought or is still being fought. Hopefully we talk about the past in our hospitals, of course, but also in our streets, in our squares, in our buses, trains, subways, basically in our transports. So the goal of this session is to gather and confront different perspectives on these issues from, your urban and regional and city authorities in different parts of Europe, so to reflect different contexts. And so, these realities have been, these institutions as well, have been on the very front line in dealing with the pandemic in this period, and also perspectives from European multimodal transport platforms, and new research organizations as well. And all these crowned by a very, very, positive and important EU framework around smart and sustainable mobility that will help us introduce the debate that we'll have. So let me start with what I'm sure will be a very impressive and entertaining keynote by a very important person in the European Commission when it comes to mobility, but also when it comes to cities, Matthew Baldwin, Deputy Director General of DG Move. He's the European Coordinator for Road Safety in there, but also now, since a few, months already, time flies, manager of the mission on climate neutral and smart cities. So Matthew has been in the Commission for a very long time, and is the best friend of cities, the one that understands really the needs of local authorities and territorial, let's say, subnational authorities. And he's going to speak about different things, about various things that touch upon the twin transition, digital and green, and cities, right? And maybe the first and the last points, and the first and the last things are the most important, I would say. Yeah, the Green Deal as a starting point, and how cities relate to that. How can we operationalize it, the Green Deal, on the ground? And by that I mean, the mission on climate neutral and smart cities, since I've worked on it a lot. And there are so many expectations from cities on this mission and so on. So it's a sort of tale that you would want in your keynote today. So Matthew, can I give you the floor? And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Annalisa. Lovely to see you. It was such a nice introduction. I thought I'd died briefly I think I'm still just about live and kicking. It's great to be with you. And Annalise, I don't know if you remember when you were a kid, which I regret to say was a lot more recently than when I was a kid, but we all had these toys, these Russian dolls to play with, I guess. And, you know, you have one thing inside another. But remember this. And so I'm going to go, my Russian doll on the outside is the European Green Deal. And as you say, on the inside, it's the city. And remember, it's the doll in the middle, which is always the best looking and the one that you wanted to keep as a kid. And that's you, the city. Anyway, I'm not sure that metaphor works, but I tried it anyway. Let me begin indeed with the European Green Deal. And it's great to be with Forum Europe for this wonderful conference, so well timed in terms of the role of the city in all of this, which, as I hope to show, is elemental. But let's begin quickly with the European Green Deal, remind ourselves of this existential challenge we've taken on to be a climate neutral city by 2050. In order to do that, we need to take these strong intermediate steps. And the whole of the Commission convulsed now with delivering a package fit for 55, meaning the 55% reduction that we know we need to deliver by 2030. Decisions expected before the summer break on what package of proposals we're going to put on that crucial package for the future. And if I may say, as you mentioned kindly, Annalise, after all these years in the Commission, I was intensely proud last September at the State of the Union address. And there we were coming out of the pandemic. And President Ursula von der Leyen, she made a point of saying that there was a lot of speculation around, will the European Commission back off some of the high-level targets of the European Green Deal? Our whole economy has been through a terrible shock with COVID. And she doubled down. She said, we're not backing off. Some people would like us to go higher. Some people would like us to temper our ambitions, but we're proposing at least 55% because we know we can do it. We've modeled it, and it's what we need as a continent if we're to get there. And so, as she said, Fit for 55, the European Green Deal becomes our new European growth strategy. And it's a twin strategy to recover and to go green at the same time. InvestEU, the recovery and resilience plans, which are now coming out onto the streets, all the member states setting out how they're going to spend their share of the nearly 700 billion euros in grants and loans. And I'm very pleased to say, because of the parameters we've set, the digital and the green transitions will be served very strongly by these recovery plans. We take our cue from that here in DG Move. In December of last year, we came forward with the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy. And once again, we are reminded, we are confronted with our responsibilities as a sector. The transport to greenhouse emissions are the only ones that are still growing, now represent as much as a quarter of the EU total. And so that is the huge challenge for the transport sector as a whole, to reduce its emissions, to become more sustainable. Very briefly, what's the strategy about? It's about ensuring that all modes become sustainable. So not just modal shift, as we've talked about in the past, but all modes have ultimately got to get there. In the meantime, we need to make sure that where modes such as aviation and shipping are going to need a little bit more time, there are sustainable alternatives that citizens can use. And thirdly, we need to ensure that we're incentivizing the use of those sustainable alternatives, including by this famous idea of internalizing the external costs of transport. As Annalisa, you mentioned, the congestion, the road deaths, the terrible air quality, all of these factors we need to internalize. And again, the strategy commits us to do that as well over the coming decades. That's all great, I hear you say, or I hope I hear you say. What does it mean for urban transport in the EU? Some of you may know we've had a package of measures in place since 2013 called the Urban Mobility Package, imaginatively. And we felt it was long overdue that we updated those steps. We had a Court of Auditors report, for example, showing that the objectives remain valid and they're very similar to the things I just set out, but we weren't delivering them. We were falling short. We haven't really legislated at all thus far on urban mobility out of respect for subsidiarity, that golden principle. But I think there is now a widespread understanding that the EU, in partnership with member states and regions and cities, could do more at the urban level. And so watch this space. We'll be coming out later this year, probably in the fourth quarter of this year, with a new urban mobility framework, strengthening the ideas around sustainable urban mobility plans, looking again at things like urban mobility indicators. And as you also mentioned, Annalisa, this whole question of multimodality, trying to ensure seamless mobility for the last mile and the first mile, both for freight and for passengers, that begins and invariably ends in cities. And what more can we do there with mobility as a service using new digital solutions? And once again, the digital and the tween transitions working in perfect harmony. But I want to say a word about another exciting project which Annalisa mentioned, which I think fits perfectly, like a hand into a glove, with what we're trying to do on the sustainable and smart mobility strategy and with the urban mobility framework. Sorry to throw all these terrible jargon words at you. And that is to see if we can't go an extra step with a small group of cities to try to ensure, to work with them, to help them become climate neutral by 2030. In fact, we want all cities to be climate neutral by 2050, not just on transport and mobility, but on energy efficiency, energy generation and distribution, in the circular economy and waste management, in all the different areas of a city's activities. But we thought and we felt, picking up the report that Annalisa and her colleagues worked on in the mission board report, that we can help cities come into the vanguard of the European Green Deal by taking the extra steps to become fully climate neutral by 2030. And I want to say a word about how we envisage that process working. In fact, we're still waiting, so this is slightly premature. We're still waiting for our final green light from the European Commission at the political level. But I'm very much hopeful that we'll be able to launch a call for expression of interest in September. This will enable cities to come forward and identify why and how they feel they can get there in a broad level. We want to see a political motivation from the cities, a determination to achieve that. I'm sorry, there's a lot of helicopters flying around here because President Biden's in town. To ensure that that there's a strong political commitment, and then we'll invite cities to start co-creating climate city contracts. This is where a city from bottom up looks at what it needs to do to deliver on climate neutrality, maybe focusing particularly on sustainable urban mobility, maybe on other aspects, but delivering also with it a related investment plan. Where's the money going to come from? There's a study done by Material Economics for the Mission Board report, which talks about an average 1 billion cost for a city of an average population size of just 100,000. It's substantial in terms of the financial commitment, and you can do the sums and you'll realize that that money is not coming from the Horizon Europe budget. It's not coming from the EU budget. It's not even coming from a city budget. In fact, we think only 17% of it will come from a city. We need to plug cities into the new green financial flows of sustainable finance for the vast parts of this. And therefore, you can expect to see the city and the Commission working as partners in this activity with partners such as the European Investment Bank Group and national and regional promotional banks. At the heart of this new mission, as we're calling it, with a conscious nod towards the Apollo dimension of the name, the moonshot nature of what we're trying to achieve. At the heart of that is the spirit of innovation. We're coming from Horizon Europe backgrounds. We will need innovation of all different kinds, innovations in urban mobility and energy, but also innovations in governance, innovations in how we can replicate and upscale the policies, learn from each other, innovations in how we reach out to citizens and bring them into this. Our sustainable mobility has got to be sustainably supported, meaning for a long time, by citizens. And as someone was saying to me the other day, cities are where policies meet people, positively and negatively, and where we need to engage with citizens to make sure that there is buy-in for these policies. It's not going to be one size fits all. What Vitoria-Gasteiz needs in terms of citizens engagement is going to be very different from what Gothenburg is going to be doing. But what we want to ensure is that we work together to make sure that the citizens are plugged in across Europe. And also the private sector. When you look at the examples of where this is working most effectively at the moment, cities, there's a few cities that have got this target already. Just down the road in Leuven, they're committed already to be climate neutral by 2030. They're working most effectively with the local private sector, with local stakeholders, and of course with local banks. So these are the ideas which we're now putting together in this implementation plan, which we hope will be blessed. And I wanted shamelessly to use this event, and I'll stop in a moment to flag what we're doing, to prick your interest, to get you involved, and to hope that there will be many more cities wishing to join the 100 climate neutral and smart cities mission by 2030, which will be launching later this year. Annalisa, let me stop there. I would like really, frankly, to stop and listen to what your panel has to say. I'll stay plugged in. And in the unlikely event that there are questions or comments addressed to me, I'll be happy to pick them up. So thank you very much for your attention, everyone. Annalisa, we can't hear you, or I can't.
Ah, that's it. It's the typical, it had to happen once. So thank you very much, Matthew. Maybe, yeah, just to catch your, again, the head and the tail in what you said, you know, the Green Deal is the new European strategy. It's unnegotiable, even facing a huge crisis like this one, but even better because of this huge crisis and the opportunity that this crisis can open. And as a tail, partnerships, you know, it's important to work together at all level of governance, government and sectors, actors. If we don't join forces, we'll go nowhere, and this strategy will not, you know, be delivered. So that's, I would.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just on one point, what you said, you used an interesting word there, which is non-negotiable. And I think literally, if Greta Thunberg was here, she would absolutely agree with that. And the climate is non-negotiable. But we have to be realistic in the European Union. We are negotiating with member states. And, you know, they are going to find these targets tough. We're not apologizing for that. And this is where the cities can come in. Member states that are saying, how on earth are we going to meet these new obligations? If we can demonstrate and show them that they have a partner in their own cities who are ready to go and deliver this, as we've seen, as you know, Annalisa, that's a really exciting development. Cities that are prepared not just to gain these great co-benefits that come from climate neutrality, but if you like, to put the member states on their back and help them deliver the targets we're urging them to adopt.
Definitely, I cannot agree more. You know, opening a door that is already open, with me at least. So maybe we can look if there are questions for Matthew. I mean, as he said, he's going to be with us in the panel, but we could take a couple if there are. Otherwise, we move to our guests, other guests. I don't see any questions coming in the chat. So, okay. So now we move to introduce 4 other VIPs, you know, in their fields. They all, you know, together they make an incredible panel. Thank you for being part of that. So I'd like to introduce them very briefly, one after the other, and then we'll ask them to do a short introductory statement, okay? So Anna Oregi, I hope I pronounce it correctly, who is the deputy mayor of the city of Vitoria-Gasteiz in the Basque Country in Spain. She's an urban architect and, as I said, the current deputy mayor in charge of land, climate action, mobility, and public space, all very, very, very strategic areas. I know that your work history have been in positions of responsibility in the Basque Country. I mean, in the you know, in the region. So, as a minister, also in charge for the environment and land policy, vice minister, director, council delegate, and so on, and even president of the network of Basque municipalities for sustainability. So you have an impressive, you know, background in these areas. And so, and you even have served as an MP in the Basque Parliament. So incredible. So we're very honored to have you here. So then we have Christina Lindfors, Director General. Hello, Director General of Urban Transport Administration in the city of Gothenburg in Sweden. Gothenburg is a member of Eurocities. I'm very happy to have you here. Even Vitoria-Gasteiz, even if you're not a member, it's very good anyway. I'm joking, just to break the ice. And I know that Gothenburg, for having worked with them quite a lot, you know, as you've committed to reduce your climate footprint to close to 0 by 2030. So you're one of the most ambitious one, and to provide your, you know, citizens with a healthy living environment. So we are all very, very curious to hear about what you're going to tell us. And then Aurélien Posana, if I pronounce it again rightly, you're head of public policy for Western Europe and the EU at BOLT, you know, the leading European multimodal transport platform. And also here you have two hats. You represent BOLT, but you also represent Move EU, because you're very, very recently you've been, you know, I don't know if it's appointed or elected anyway, member of the board, and so you have a very important role in there, which is the European Association of On-Demand Mobility. So Aurélien, you are in this position since 2018, and you've been in charge of the dialogue with public authorities in 15 countries, in addition to EU institutions. So you're really well, you know, you're the right man here. You've got two local authorities and the EU institution, the Commission. Then we have welcome to the three of you. And then we have Jeroen Boss. That's him. Welcome again as well. Cluster Manager of Societal Impact for Accessibility and Livability, Traffic and Transport. Also a very important set of responsibilities in TNO, which is a Dutch organization that connects people and knowledge to create innovations in order to boost the competitive strength of industry and the well-being of society in a sustainable way. So a very, very important mission. And yes, it's an important and big organization because you have over 3,400 professionals. So it's quite, it's impressive. So these are our guests together with Matthew that we have introduced earlier on. And I would like to give the floor to each of you for, 3-4 minutes, depending on how you want to do it, for a statement to just introduce your organization, your perspective to the theme, on the theme of today. Anna, would you like to start?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Annalisa, for your kind presentation, and also to Matthew for the inspiring keynote. Vitoria-Gasteiz, for several decades, has been working to become a more sustainable city. Its balanced growth, quality urban planning, and growing concern for the environment and the well-being of people are the basis on which it has designed its sustainable city model. Based on these principles, Vitoria-Gasteiz has been designing and implementing its urban policies, placing special emphasis on the most pressing problems and challenges at each point in time. In 2012, Vitoria-Gasteiz received the European Green Capital Award from the European Commission in recognition of its environmental and urban development policies. In 2019, the organization Global Forum on Human Settlements named our city Global Green City for its efforts and achievements in fulfilling the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030. The 21st century has brought important changes to the city, both in its morphological and functional structure, which have forced a rethinking of some of the urban policies implemented to date. Over these years, Vitoria-Gasteiz has experienced significant urban expansion, which has spread the city out, causing important environmental and social dysfunctions. This includes a considerable increase in travel and mobility in general, the artificialization of new land, and the creation of large urban gaps between the new districts and the established city. In view of this scenario, Vitoria-Gasteiz is adopting new policies on urban planning, building, environment, mobility, etc. Among these policies, the Sustainable Mobility and Public Space Plan seeks to properly manage mobility needs and modes in the city to reduce car-related impacts and increase public space for people. In this regard, many of the sustainable mobility actions being carried out free up space previously occupied by the cars for the use and enjoyment of citizens, as well as introducing trees, creating new green areas, incorporating permeably pavements, and other solutions that improve environmental quality and the city's living and working spaces. Some of the most important milestones were the process of pedestrianization, which began at the end of the 70s, and which in a few years had already extended to more than 20 streets and 1,400 square meters, and the creation of the first network of cycle paths in the whole state of Spain. One of the most notable aspects of the new model launched here in 2006 is the introduction of the superblock as the basic spatial unit for the reorganization of mobility networks. The progressive implementation of the superblocks scheme and traffic calming actions throughout the city will allow the pedestrian space to increase from 31% to 70%. Other important measures, such as the restructuring of urban public transport, the promotion of cycling, and the development of urban footpaths, are also helping to reduce the use of private cars in favor of more sustainable models. In 2020, the new public space and mobility plan was revised, the last one was revised, with the aim of updating it and adapting the strategies and actions to meet the new social, urban, economic, and mobility situation of Vitoria-Gasteiz. New challenges such as mobility to work and school, the electrification of mobility, urban distribution of goods, and projects such as the Intelligent Electric Bus, BRT, we are implementing. The tram extension to new neighborhoods will influence the new mobility scheme for the future. These actions will favor the decarbonization of urban mobility in our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was really interesting because, I mean, you can really see how Vitoria-Gasteiz is pioneered a lot of things. I mean, your plan that you're talking about in 2006 is the result also of, very, very experimental actions from a long time. And you talked about the 70s when you pedestrianized, so it's incredible. And also, I would retain this idea of a strong focus on public space, which sometimes the SUMP don't always have. So it's really incredible. And you mentioned as well the Agenda 2030. So you're not having awards because you're a green city, but you also demonstrated that you are taking a holistic approach, transversal, cross-cutting, and participatory, like the SDGs have in their nature. So extremely interesting. Thank you very much. And now, Christina, Gothenburg is a very interesting city, as we said, in terms of evolution and transformation. Would you like to share your introductory remarks?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. And it was really good to listen to both Anna and Matthew as a start. It's impressive what you do. Since Gothenburg is a fast-growing city, we face challenges both in keeping the transport system effective and at the same time make room for a lot more people and businesses. We are keen on growing in a sustainable way, creating an attractive, livable, healthy city where people and business thrive. If that wasn't difficult and expensive enough, we all face the climate threat. And Gothenburg is serious about meeting the climate targets. The political will is to reach the target by 2030, also because we think being a frontrunner is a business opportunity. Modeling different scenarios, we understand the situation like this. If we shall reach the climate targets early, we need to transport all fuels from fossil to fossil-free before 2030. That means all vehicles in our city fleet and moving around in Gothenburg need to run on batteries, hydrogen, and biofuels in the next 8 years. EU standards for vehicle emissions then becomes extremely important. But that is not enough to meet the climate goals. We also need to reduce traffic flow by 25%. During the pandemic, traffic levels decreased by 16%, and CO2 from transports in Sweden dropped 6%. But new pandemics are not the answer to our challenges. Our Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, SUMP, is paving the way for space-efficient transport modes. Expanding the public transport system with tram infrastructure and new bus systems is a key element in our growing city. We focus on transport efficiency, public transport as an example, equal access and affordability. And in line with our strategy for traffic innovation, we take part in multiple collaborations with government, industries, SMEs, and academy. In this way, Gothenburg becomes an early adopter of innovations like electrical buses. Running a conventional bus line as a test bed for 5 years paved the way for brave but difficult decisions procuring our new city fleet. New business models replaced old ones and new stakeholders arose. Maybe the decision, the threshold, would have been too difficult without the testbed. Testing new solutions is something to consider in the new urban mobility strategy. Other tests we are running are on geofencing, supplying our environmental zone as open geodata, hybrid vehicles automatically turn from combustion to electric mode, entering our environmental zone. Now geofencing also helps drivers keeping the speed limits, a brilliant solution for city fleets. We want to take an active role in realizing the potential of mobility services. For this reason, we have joined the newly established CCAM partnership, firmly believing cooperation is the key to success. Because Europe is diverse, the solutions need to be flexible. Gothenburg might have a slightly different view on mobility as a service, for example. For us, it's crucial to keep the doors for business-to-business solutions open and business to customers too. Today, e-scooters serves 6 times as many travelers as our public city bikes do. Urban transport administrations don't always need to be involved to move things forward. A lot needs to happen, and now we are inviting real estate owners, companies, and all other actors to join our initiative, Gothenburg Green City Zone. It's an initiative to build our climate-neutral transport system together by testing innovation in a larger scale. With the same goal and high interest in innovation, we want to drive change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christina. So Gothenburg is not only ambitious about reaching the climate targets, but also very, very serious, because just reducing the traffic by 25% in the vehicles that have to move to fossil fuel free by 2030 is very, very ambitious and very, a very strong aim, and heavy focus on innovation, of course. And again, you said it, partnerships.
Yes.
So the
Yes.
quadruple helix to test new solutions like geofencing and green city zone and so on. So go on, because this is actually, come and join the mission, because this is, this idea of working together with all the actors around, one common goal is exactly the spirit. So I hope you will look into it. Mm-hmm. So we move to and don't hesitate to come to Eurocities to ask for more information. Aurélien Posana, who is from Bolt, we said. So how would you like to introduce your perspective, Aurélien?
Good afternoon, Annalisa, and thank you very much for Europe too for this opportunity. So I'm representing this afternoon MoveEU, which is the European Association for Ride-Hailing, and by ride-hailing we mean PHVs, private hire vehicles, and on-demand taxis, and what I believe the Commission calls now passenger transport on demand. So basically, we platforms operating in Europe intermediate transport services between the hundreds of thousands of drivers which provide such services in Europe, in the European Union, and the tens of millions of EU citizens which use our services. And I believe many of you have already used our services in all around Europe, in all the cities where we operate our services. We, of course, because of the importance of this industry, ride-hailing platforms have a strong role to play when it comes to sustainability. And though we do not own ourselves a car, we strongly believe we have a role. Definitely, we do have to bear our fair share of responsibility. And you may have heard the strong and ambitious but right objectives of the Commission that Matthew Baldwin has listed, and we fully agree and are willing to support this. So we've already pledged as platforms that by 2040, the latest, all the rides which will take place on our platforms will be decarbonized. If we can go faster, of course, we will do so, but we think already it's an ambitious objective, given the diversity of member states where we operate. And I think that's always very important to take into account, that the diversity of the landscape when we speak on such topics. But at the same time, the effort absolutely must be strong and jointly. So to reach that objective, of course, we have to do our part of the efforts, but we of course hope that the European Commission, by different initiatives, will be able to support this trend. We could mention, for example, that we strongly believe that there's a need to develop charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. And here I'm not speaking of the large road networks. I think there are already quite a lot of initiatives which are carried here, but since we're talking about cities today, we believe that still within the city centers, there's much room as of today for improvement. And because the drivers who often do not live around the suburbs, around the big cities, and don't have a charging point at home, they need to have access to fast charging infrastructure within the city centers where they work. And as of today, this is still lacking. So we strongly hope that both the cities and EU institutions can encourage the development of charging infrastructure and maybe create some kind of right to plug in the EU for all the different users of mobility services, including ride-hailing drivers. It's important also to encourage the second-hand EV market, because that will be an opportunity for the hundreds of thousands of drivers who operate throughout Europe to have access more easily to electric cars. And here again, I really underline that it's important to take into account the diversity of cities, the diversity of member states throughout the European Union. Important probably also to set up a financing fund to incentivize for fleet renewal of the ride-hailing sector, to encourage this churn to electric, low-emission vehicles. And perhaps the current national recovery funds, which are currently being examined by the Commission, could be also an opportunity to accelerate this trend. Now, that's the part on what we can do together with the support of the cities, together with the support of the European Commission. But at the same time, it is important that our sector is able to operate in an environment where there is a regulatory level playing field, where there are balanced rules. And as of today, I have to say that we still operate in a framework with very outdated rules. And some of those rules are actually against the Green Deal objective we just mentioned. If, for example, if I very briefly take a few examples, in several member states, as of today, for the ride-hailing sector, for the PHV sector, you still have what is called a return to garage rule, meaning that every time a driver finishes its ride, it has to drive empty back to its garage, which just increases the number of kilometers which are driven and makes no sense. But these rules are very outdated. There is now a strong need to modernize them. At the same time, for example, drivers are sometimes not allowed to use their professional car for personal use, meaning they need to have a second car. And whereas ride-hailing, we believe, is one of the shared mobility options today, we believe it helps to decrease, together with other mobility services, of course, the individual property of cars. If you still have those rules in place, well, basically, you're just canceling the positive impact of ride-hailing. At the same time, we need to have an industry, a ride-hailing industry, which is able to modernize, to provide safe, efficient, and sustainable, we hope, mobility services to the tens of millions of citizens who use our services. But for example, if I take on-demand taxis, there is today a lack of flexibility in prices. This is detrimental to the drivers. This is detrimental to the drivers, to the platforms, and in the end, to everybody. So really here, I would like to underline that at the same time, we are fully conscious we need to do our part of the effort to have a more sustainable service, more sustainable industry. But those rules which today regulate our sector, it's high time that they are modernized. We hope that the Commission here can set up some kind of level playing field, some harmonized regulation, still taking into account subsidiary, but there would be a layer of harmonized rule in the European Union for our sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aurélien. Good to hear. Good to hear what you say, that you are ambitious and serious as well on decarbonization, of course, with many challenges related to the diversity of national frameworks and contexts, and you know, this idea of the right to plug, interesting. And that's why you call for a better regulatory level playing field for the ride-hailing sector in the EU. So thank you for this introduction, and we conclude the first introduction round with Jeroen from TNO. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the keynote, Matthew, and all the introduction statements. Well, my name is Jiren Boss. I work for TNO, research organization in the Netherlands, and I work in the unit that is working on traffic and transport. And in our unit, we work along two roadmaps, smart and sustainable, or if you like, green and digital. And we do that from the vehicle level. We have our laboratories that work on smart vehicles, so making them, well, all the way up to self-driving. We are also part of the CCAM community there. And we work on sustainable vehicles, working on hydrogen or electric powertrains. Then we also have programs or roadmaps or clusters that work on what happens if you bring that together in traffic, if you bring smart vehicles in mixed traffic, or what is the roadmap towards a CCAM future. Same goes for the sustainable future. What happens if you bring low emission, if you introduce low emission zones, what happens to that system? But then the cluster that I have the honor to lead and the pleasure to lead is about the societal impact. What if all these transitions in mobility, let it be sustainable, let it be smart or higher levels of automation, what happens if that comes together in society? And then, especially in cities, we focus on what happens in cities regarding those transitions. Because when you look at some of these technologies that might seem a solution on vehicle or even traffic level, might be a problem or an additional challenge on societal level. Because what we already heard today, there is a battle for space in cities. Space is the scarce good that you have to, well, take care of very well and see how you use it. And when you look at it from a historic perspective, you could say that much of the public space, much of that scarce good that's so important for us, has been consumed by mobility. And then when you look at the transitions in mobility, digitalization, the platform economy, making a better match to the customer needs and the supply from, well, especially the private sector, you could say that becomes a better and better proposition. And when you add that to the development in autonomous driving, well, that even boosts that development towards a very dominant influence potentially of the private sector, right? And when you add that even to the development in electric driving, for instance, which also takes up a lot of space and a lot of public investments in order to make that happen, there is a big challenge. We see a big challenge for cities to keep a grip on these developments and make them work for the citizens. They want to go from A to B, comfortable, at low cost. the ability for businesses to make business, I mean, that has to happen as well, fair enough. It has to be in cooperation, but also to safeguard the societal goals, sustainability goals, but also equity, let it be affordable for everybody, and also the distribution of value geographically, so to say. And in order to give that grip, well, first providing insight, we build digital twins of cities, digital city twins, where we bring together all the data that we can get of the current situation. And we bring together models of what we know of how users of the system will adapt to new propositions. And then you can see what type of regulations or where you should start managing new mobility in such a way that you can nudge it towards these societal goals. Because we can also run simulations that if you leave it fully to the market, if you say, okay, we give our public space to the market and leave it up to the market to supply mobility, well, unlimited, because that's one of the scenarios that you see happening in some places of the world, then you can forecast what would happen with public space and livability in cities. And we try to enable, especially city governments, in cooperation with the private sector, in cooperation with the other governance layers, well, to nudge that in the right direction and to safeguard these societal goals.
Really, like you've captured exactly, like you concluded really well this round, because looking at really the societal impact of all these technologies is a fundamental element, and it's also part of the reflections we had in the mission itself. So it's I would be very interested to hear also what the other panelists things and how they include this element in their own plans. But I don't know, maybe Matthew, would you like to also say something that reacts to any of what you've heard?
Well, it's an amazing, wonderful, rich set of observations from two of the pioneering cities. And thank you both for all the leadership you're providing and from, great complementary discussions. I was very struck, as you were, Annalisa, by the reference to the use of public space and how I think for all of our panelists in different ways, that's a relevant question as we come out of COVID. And I can't be the only one who has, all their neighbors saying, I'd never thought before just how much space we're devoting to the private car, and how complicated it becomes with social distancing if you're waiting in line to buy your fish and there's no room. And so where does the spillover go? Just illustrations like this suggest to me the timing of these discussions is never been better. I very much take the points made by Aurélien about the need to develop a strong charging infrastructure. Through our recharge and refuel pledges in the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, we are promising by 2025 to build half of the 1,000 hydrogen stations and 1/3 of the 3 million public recharging points needed by 2030. And a lot of those are going to have to be in cities. And that's one of the things we can look at in the context of the 10T revisions that are coming up under the urban mobility framework. So there's lots of different avenues we can pursue. There isn't one solution. There's no magic bullet solution for all of these things. But boy, that was a rich panel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. There are some questions from the chat that it would be interesting to take for our city representatives, for instance. So Vitoria-Gasteiz and Gothenburg. There are 3 questions. Maybe you can see if you want to take which one you want to take of you two. For instance, I tell the 3 and then you pick them. So the first is, how will you maintain access to city centers for tradesmen, companies and citizens? For example, your house needs urgent repair, action, roof, water pipes, blah, blah, blah. That's one question. The second question is, how will shops and restaurants manage their delivery support? And last, on food shopping, so the shopping issue, for a lot of people is a matter of once a week or once a month. This means high transport capacity and very few people buy their daily nutrition daily. So how do you want to answer? And then we pass to other questions. Maybe Anna, you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Annalisa. Yes, for us in the city center, the access to our city center is free in some hours. We come in some time in the morning. Usually, you can access to all the city. There are restrictions, of course, but also we are developing the deliveries by bikes, but different bikes models. We are just thinking about the deliveries from the commerce, or just in pandemic time we had an increase of that, because the restaurants were closed, and a lot of people took the takeaway, and we saw a big improvement in the deliveries. So we are encouraging not only the deliverers, but also the commerce and the shops. We are working with them to put in place the soft delivery. So I think we are having interesting times in that, and we need to improve, but we are on work.
Good, thank you very much. What about Christina? Would you like to pick one of them?
Yes, yeah. I can say I think the three questions is
connected.
Yes, is connected. I think so, and I know this is a challenge. Of course it is, and that's why you have to work together. Not the public sector you can do that alone. We need to cooperate a lot with the business and so on. And we have an example from Gothenburg where we work with this city delivery in town, where you can help each other, and you can deliver things together with this city delivery. And I think that's the way to go. That it's not only the business, not only the public sector who can do this alone. You have to do it together. And of course, you need you have to get space for delivery to get through, and then other people of us who don't need to travel then by car or anything can do it in another way. So we have to have to cooperate. I think that's the most important in this way, and do this smart solutions together.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. We have another question from the audience on a methodology, on a specific bicycle methodology, the Bikenomics, as developed in Civitas Handshake. Matthew, would you like to pick that?
I'd love to. I just can't resist commenting on the previous question as well. I completely agree with Anna and Christina, but I mean, if I may, I'm sorry, I don't know who asked that question, and it's a perfectly valid thing, but all these terrible, insuperable problems, we can't possibly pedestrianize or change our cities because, gee whiz, we might have to bring in a bathtub. Well, these are not insuperable problems. Of course, someone bringing in a bathtub or a refrigerator, that can, you can have exceptional things. I also foresee lots of exceptional use permits for medical personnel, for plumbers, and all kinds of things. Let's be pragmatic. No one's trying to sort of organize a sort of religious colony here as a city. It's a city that's got to live and to breathe. And by the way, if you want to live and breathe, it is the pedestrians and bikes that are the ones who are really going to nourish the retail sector. I mean, the classic thing when you pedestrianize a center is the retail people, oh my God, no one's going to shop here anymore. Well, they're under onslaught from e-commerce, and the only people who are stopping by are the people walking by or going on their bikes, and it's usually the savior of the retail. Anyway, I will stop telling the cities what they already know, but this is all a part of the 15-minute city, another kind of COVID thing we're all starting to think through. Let not insuperable problems be ultimately insuperable. We can find ways to address everything. Great question from Pascal van den Noord, and it gives me a chance to say how much I love the Civitas Handshake program. It's exemplary of a great Horizon Europe thing, churning out useful ideas. And what this is getting at is that one of the problems that cities face in doing things like building new bike infrastructure is, where's the revenue stream from that? You know, you build a bike lane, it costs money, and then the bikes ride on it for free. It's not like a subway system or anything else where you can generate revenue. Well, that is an issue for cities in terms of getting loans, perhaps. But the Bikeonomics methodology says, look at the broader returns that flow. Look at the health benefits. Look at the decongestion benefits. Back to this point you were making earlier, Annalisa, about the external costs. Look at the saved lives because people are riding safely on their bike lanes instead of being mixed up with traffic. Look at the air quality gains. The problem, if I may, is that for cities, it's hard to actually get that value themselves from their budgets. So the money goes out to build the bike lanes and the money doesn't come back in through this health savings or the other things. So that's a problem that we need to recognize societally to help make sure that we're building the right number of bike lanes and not getting held up by how the returns are visualized or realized. But the point that the Bikeonomics folks are making is these returns are real and they're quick and they're high. And the material economic study that we were talking about, Annalisa, earlier, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much, I will stop.
No.
Talks about the 1 billion per city cost of all of these things. That's recouped over not a very long time period in terms of the co-benefits that come from this. I mean, I see Anna and Christina both nodding. You've seen those co-benefits flowing because you've been at this a long time. We need to spread the message. Thank you.
Yes, would you like to react, Anna and Christina? We'll bring you in now, Aurélien, very soon. But would you like to react in terms of, it's also about, behavioral change and how do you work with citizens to, and also with the retailers to make them understand that actually changing the way we move is actually gonna be very positive for everything, for so many, reasons, and the co-benefits.
I think it's very interesting to listen to Matthew, and I like to see it in this different perspectives that you can see both in economic, ecological, and social sustainability, and in this healthy perspective, how we can travel and how it affects the people. I think it's very, very interesting to see that, and I think it's we are very responsible for what's happening after post-COVID as well. We are big employers who can, I think that we can affect that now. If you think about how people can work, and I think the most sustainable way of traveling is not traveling. So how can you work at home and so on in the future? So I like the perspective when you can see it in all these different ways.
Facets, yeah. Yeah, I see Jeroen really nodding in a big way. But Anna, you wanted to say something.
Yes. Yes. In our case, in Vitoria-Gasteiz, we are very involved very committed with a human scale city. We said all times like that. It's a human scale city, and the most we would like is people to work and to enjoy the city in the daily routes and in the daily transportation. So we have here 50% of our population is working to every day to work. No other commuting. But also we have we have in Basque Country we are three sister cities in 1 hour distance. So it's very important. Also here is very important the commute between our three cities. So for us, a problem in terms of transportation is the regulation also between the cities. As you said before, I was Minister of Transport some years before, and I was in charge of all the region. And it was very difficult to manage that, because the position of the cities they are very fair, very proud of the necessities and capacities, and they said, oh no, region government, no, that's something we need to do by ourselves. But now I am here in the city position, and I see it's very important also to have the relationship between the other cities. So I think we need some kind of regulation, some kind of projects to do together, not only inside city, but also around the other cities, and to move in a sustainable way.
You mean in a metropolitan scale, for instance, and regional scale?
It's not a metropolitan. In our case, it's three cities in 1 hour. So right. It's a lot of people commuting every day. But in the middle is nothing. It's a beautiful scenario, beautiful landscapes, but not city. So to commute is important. And if I can introduce a little bit more thing, I am very interested in this moment. I am very interested in the equity of transport, in terms also of taxis, so of fares. I don't know. Here we are traditional. You buy your ticket, you go into the bus, into the tram. But I think we need it's a public service. For me is essential public service in terms of equity. It's very important. So I would like to see from the Commission, from the governments. I would like to see things in this
direction.
In this way, yes. Also.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, unless one of you wants to react on this, or we move. Yes, Jeroen, because you were nodding.
Yeah, because very interesting. And well, to start with cycling, we are from the Netherlands, so we are very well familiar with cycling, right? Well, up to now, you could say in our program we have been modeling all these different transportation flows and try to see how you can accommodate a model shift out of the car into public transport and cycling. And of course, if you calculate that on a community level, that's obviously a good idea, right? But then, when you talk about equity, there are some groups that just do not cycle, that are not familiar with cycling. And if you push them out of the car, but they don't have an alternative in cycling, you basically increase inequality. And I also like the example of the three cities that are connected with nothing in between. I don't know if you know the Netherlands with the Randstad, Rotterdam, Utrecht. Yeah. And when you look at, there's also a lot of commute between these city centers, but when you look closely, it's the higher income groups, it's the higher educated people that commute between these different poles. And within the city, or close to the city, are the lower incomes. So we have to be very aware if we cater public transport between these cities, and it's a political question if it's a good idea or not, but we have to be aware that we cater the mobility of the higher incomes. So talking about equality and making seamless mobility, that is definitely an issue. So now, and it's new to our research, is that we do not only look at the flows and the impact of the flows and how we create a model shift, but also if we invest or stimulate something, well, who will benefit and who is left behind?
Yes. And Aurélien, I think, wanted to add something, and then Matthew.
Yes, I wanted to mention that ride-hailing platforms are actually more and more becoming multimodal platforms, in the sense that we either directly or through partnerships now on our platforms offer also, for example, micro-mobility options. So within all the members of MovieU, actually on their platforms, you will find also, for example, free-floating bike services, scooter free-floating services, moped free-floating services, and so on. And actually, we as Baldwin operate in a big diversity of countries, and you will find very different multimodal solutions. So I think it's important to indeed to underline that it's about different mobility solutions for different times of the day, for different usage. And I think it's important to preserve this type of different solutions which add to the other, so that the user has the choice. And maybe you need some kind of mobility service during daytime, I don't know, to go to work, to go to a doctor. But then when you come back from the dinner late night, the other side of the city, from friends, well, you will need perhaps another type of services. And all those mobility services, I don't think they only compete against each other, but they complement each other. And that's why it's important to preserve, I think, a wide scope of options for the EU citizens, for depending on their interest area. And just to give a very brief example, what we do at Bolt is that we are developing more and more in our app the option of when, for example, you are ordering a ride-hailing car for a short distance, we will offer you the option, trying to nudge here the behavior, to choose a bike or a scooter, for example, instead, because that indeed would help on the congestion part, on the sustainability part. So just to underline indeed that we are very conscious and we strongly believe into multimodality, and that all those different options can complement each other.
Yes, thank you very much, Aurélien. I will come back to you on another point. Matthew?
Well, just very quickly.
Said you wanted to...
Yeah, I mean, I just, again, we're all agreeing with each other a bit too much, but there's an interesting nuance here. I mean, I very much agree with what Aurélien said about the importance of multimodality and, avoiding a one-size-fits-all view for how different cities will need different types of multimodality. But what's clear is we're going to need it. The notion that we're going to have one uni trip, a sort of standard trip, is not going to work within a city, or certainly not between cities. So we need different options. That's very much clear for the first and the last mile options, and multimodality is the best way to do this. And we're also really glad that Anna raised the question of equity, and I'd like to pick up with what she and Jiren said. Again, it's never as clear as it appears. Within a city, if you look at patterns of car ownership, for example, less than half the citizens of Brussels have access to a car. 2/3 of the poorer households in Berlin have no access to a car. So be wary next time someone tells you that, if we start charging for road use, or if it becomes harder to use a car in a city, that we're quote unquote penalizing poor people. Outside the city, it gets more complicated, as Jiren said. And I think, therefore, we need, as cities, thinking about this, plugging into that broader environment. The answer is not, in my humble opinion, it's just my opinion, is not necessarily for them to give the perfect right for everyone to drive their car into the city for free and have full access. Their answer may be creative use of park and ride schemes, better public transport flows, and all these other things to try to prevent these kind of external costs being imposed on other people. No one solution fits all, but we've got to find digital and sustainable options for citizens to find our way to the future. Thank you.
Yeah, very, very clear. But going back to Aurélien, maybe because, so I don't know if we all agree too much, but you represent an industry that, of course, can be considered as part of the solution. And you've said it yourself in terms of decarbonization and so on, and offers, but also sometimes part of the problem. I mean, in terms of controversial relations that have been taking place, or discussions and so on. So how do you work with cities to ensure that your transport solution fits well into the broader urban transport ecosystem, and how do you deal with the controversies that are going on, that are sometimes put on the table?
Well, the best way to do it is first to have a dialogue. So we are in a constant dialogue, of course, with the cities, with the regional governments, with the national governments, and of course with the EU institutions. I mean, as I said, I think we strongly believe that ride-hailing is one of the options of shared mobility. Again, it's not fit for all type of transport needs, for short ones, for ones, for example, where there is another alternative. But in many cases, it may be an option. And in that sense, I think in the last 15 years, it has brought a strong added value to European citizens in terms of offering efficient, safe, which you can track, and also cheaper. You were talking about equality. I mean, the price of a transport as of today with on-demand taxis or with PHV has really helped decrease the price of transport by shared cars in the past 15 years. And if I go back to thinking 15 years ago, I live in Paris when that type of service did not exist before. Well, that was a big issue, and you would line sometimes close to an hour to wait for a traditional taxi at that time. But now that doesn't mean that both industries can't compete, but also I think they can complement each other. And I think there's absolutely room for traditional taxis, and that, for example, street hailing should remain a monopoly for traditional taxis. But at the same time, the regulation should enable a sustainable and a useful development of ride-hailing, of on-demand taxis and PHVs. Some topics we're currently discussing with cities, and I think we mentioned it earlier, is indeed the access to city centres. I think we fully support the fact that the cities in the centres are now reducing the presence of individual cars, of individually owned cars. That we believe is the trend and is fully normal. But at the same time, we believe we are also part of the solution. So that it's important that ride-hailing cars still can be accessible in city centres. And it's also important to take into account the drivers. I mean, as I said, this industry has created hundreds of thousands of work opportunities for the drivers in Europe. So it's also important to take into account their case, specifically in a time where we're going slowly out, but surely out of this very difficult pandemic times. So it's important that these people can work. So we are dialoguing. We believe that we are part of the solution. And as I said, as an introduction, we also have to bear our responsibility on sustainability matters. So we're working on it together with you.
What about data? What about data sharing, for instance? This is one of the issues that is being discussed often.
Yes, absolutely. No, we again here we believe it is very important to share data with the other authorities, and we are very, very happy to do it, to improve, for example, the infrastructures, to improve traffic management. And in that sense, we believe that since we are, as platforms, multimodal platforms, places where we have a lot of data, we are happy to share them with the cities and with the authorities. Maybe with just the little point we need to underline is that this data, which is of course sometimes a bit confidential, both from a GDPR point of view, but also from a competitive point of view, we're very happy to share it with the cities, but it needs to be handled carefully in a cautious way. And also it's important that we understand what this data will be done, will be useful, because very often data are requested, but it's never sometimes not fully clear what it will be useful. So I think it's important to say this data will be used for that purpose. But generally speaking, yes, we are very happy to share data.
Okay, and Anna and Christina, do you want to react on this point? Are you having these conversations?
Yes, from Gothenburg then. Yes, it's interesting what you say about open data. In the city of Gothenburg, we are positive to open data as well. We think it's a good way of sharing with open data. We think that it's developing sharing this, and if you're serious about cooperation, you need to share data as well, I think. So That's the point of
Yeah.
view from us, I think.
So, great. Anna, you want to say something, and then we wrap up?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I was mute. Yes, for us, it's clearly a place to improve with sharing possibilities and also data and vehicles, of course. And we have that in our new CCAP and also in our new mobility public space plan. So we are testing some things, and I'm sure we are improving in this area.
Okay. So we're getting to the end. I would like to do. Thank you very much for these nice contributions and exchanges. Just a last maybe round with two things, each of you, if it's possible. One challenge that you want to put on the table that you are experiencing, and still you want to put it on the table for other cities to understand, cities or other organizations to to see very clearly. And a wish or a call or a recommendation sort of thing. So could we do that? Maybe we can start with Jeroen.
Yeah, please. Well, maybe also well, in line with the last topic of sharing data. Well, Matthew was saying that we all seem to agree very much in this call. However, my experience in the pilots that we do on mobility as a service is that we experience very reluctant, how do you say, attitude of all the mass service providers as well as the transport operators to really provide insight in how they use public space and how they run their business on that public space. That's really I think a big challenge that we face is to set up first governance rules and then architectures, ICT architectures, in order to be able to share the outcome of analysis on how public space is being used to enable cities and higher government layers to steer towards these societal goals and safeguard the privacy of the users of the system.
Clear. Very good. Thank you. Aurélien?
Well, thank you. Maybe I'll merge the two answers and to say that one thing we still see as of today, maybe city or regional level, is that ride-hailing sector is really still facing those what we really believe are absurd rules. And here it's detrimental to the EU citizens, it's detrimental to the drivers, it's detrimental to us as European platforms or platforms operating in Europe. And then in the end, you don't really understand who's benefiting from it. Maybe a tiny minority. And when you see that you still have rules like a driver can't come to pick up its client before 15 minutes, you still have those rules in some cities in Europe. When you have rules which say that a driver is forbidden from using his smartphone to get an order and needs to come back to a garage to get its order like by a fax, like in the old times, then there's something to be done here. And we hope that the cities, that the regional governments, that member states will accept maybe a bit of harmonization here, but just in the sake of the interest of the vast majority of the stakeholders in Europe. But that, of course, can come with duties, including on the sustainability part. And here, absolutely, I would agree that we need also to do our part of the effort, and we're very ready and willing to do it.
Great. Thank you. Now, Anna, and then Christina, and then Matthew to conclude.
Yes, our challenge is clearly to be climate neutral as soon as possible. We are fighting hard in this issue, and no letting no one behind. As I said before, it's the equity is very important for us, and so at the same time, climate neutral, but with all our citizens.
Everyone.
My wish will be being a very good place to live. My city, I would like my city to be a very, very good place to live for all our citizens and visitors. Welcome to my city.
I have a dream. Yes, it's getting there. And Christina?
Yes, it would be nice to visit you, Anna. Looking forward to that. The challenge, I think, is what Anna said about equity. That how can you use the technical solutions and still think about the people, and for all people and for different people and so on. That's the challenge, I think, and I think it's possible to have a wide perspective. But we need to think about all the different perspectives, I think. And a recommendation, I think you said also. I'd like to say that we have to try. I like the test beds that you have to try, and we can't do it in the same way in all cities, as Matthew said. You have to test in different ways and see how you can improve things and so on, and together, of course.
Yes, absolutely. And Matthew, to finish this round.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Annalisa, for just a great panel. And I mean, it's a privilege to be with all of you. And I've scribbled down lots of things you've said. You'd be embarrassed to know how much I've learned from what you've had to say. So my challenge is to all cities in Europe to listen to what Christina and Anna have said, and listen to what they're doing and how evidently proud they are of their cities as places to live. And it's no surprise because they're doing things in the interest of their citizens. My challenge is to ask you to use the COVID trauma to do things differently. Horrible cliche coming up, to build back better and to help deliver on the European Green Deal for everybody. And my wish, I bet Annalisa, you know what this is, to be able to unleash the power of the city's mission. I hope to be able to work in partnership with cities across Europe to do just that.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I'm tempted to say that's the real end of it and the real final word, but yes, I mean, in terms of, because we have 2 minutes, I think that a lot has emerged, a lot has been put on the table. It was so interesting. I think I would have liked to ask also questions about public procurement and all the potential around that. There's so much that we can talk more, but still, I mean, in terms of challenges, you've said, like joined up governance. This is really still something that everyone has to work on data, on finances, on many things. Climate neutrality, fast, radical, and with equality in the middle of the path. Same goes with technology, how not to leave people behind in terms of technological transformations. And maybe in terms of, I think the recommendations were very interesting in terms of, like, again, working together. So even if it's a challenge, we need to continue. Let's be pragmatic. You said it during the discussion, because there's no point in, just spending too much energy on how you solve something that actually maybe not a problem in the end. Let's dare and experiment, because no one size fits all, and because it's economically viable. And we all want a human scale city. Learn from them. Look at the, those that are really daring and experimenting. And to do that, let's use the mission. So maybe, yes. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you to this big forum for having organized a discussion on cities. There's a big need. It's not only about working on cities, but also with cities. And it was very, very, very inspiring. Thank you very much. And Matthew, shall we end with a song? No. No. Of course, I won't do it. Okay. So because we have this little thing about doing. We got to move it. But anyway, in mobility in the mobility field, I like to use it. But anyway,
only you can carry that off, Annalisa.
I can only do it. It's the last time I can do it. So, okay. thank you very much, everyone. And let's meet very soon in Gothenburg or in Vitoria-Gasteiz or in many other cities, because Aurélien will organize a visit, and also in Holland and in Brussels, because Matthew said. So take care, stay safe, and see you soon.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks from us as well. And Annalisa, if you want to carry on singing, you're more than welcome.
Or maybe I should have handed over to James Wilmot.
Well,
I
no,
forgot.
this is the handover, but I'm thinking perhaps we could just instead of doing the handover, you could carry on singing. But thank you, and thanks again for those concluding discussions. It was a great way to end the day, and really appreciate you all being with us. And Matthew, I'm sorry to pick on you, but everyone was excellent, but including superb moderation and singing now from Annalisa. But it's so wonderful to hear and feel someone from the institution's passion for this subject. It was great to listen to. But as I say, compliments to the panel as a whole. It was very engaging indeed. So I hope you all enjoyed today's discussions, and looking towards tomorrow, we'll be back slightly earlier than envisaged, as we'll now be joined by Minister Pedro César Vieira from Portugal. So 9:25 instead of 9:30. Not a huge time adjustment, but important to mention in any case. And don't forget, this is another opportunity now as we wrap up for you to visit the City Innovation Hub that we have running on the platform, and also to do some networking as well if you have time and are inclined. Thanks again to everyone that has participated across the program today. To our sponsors, Dell Technologies, Johnson Controls, Microsoft, and Move EU. And we're looking forward to seeing you all back here for, tomorrow for another full day of Future Cities sessions. So thank you very much, and see you all again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.